Hello, Dr. White back again. Still working on Git, still in the part 1 Git slides, but on the section called remotes. So we're going to set up a remote repository at a service called GitHub, which is sort of the Git program made social. So you're going to have to go to this URL and sign up for an account on GitHub. You'll give yourself a username and a password. Don't forget them. You're going to need to use them. Next, on GitHub, you're going to create a new repository. You're going to call it gitprac, and you're going to follow the steps that you see here. And it'll be an empty repository at the moment. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll show you what it looks like for me when I go to GitHub. And the look is going to be a little bit different for you because you don't have quite so many projects already made on GitHub. So let me see, I'm going to, just a moment, sorry. I am making a bill. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to go to github.com/my username. And we get a look at my basic profile. And I'm going to go click on repositories. And you may not have anything here yet. I've got quite a few repositories, and one could scroll through them all. One could even search in the search window here. But I'm going to ask to make a new repository, so you should do that. Let's give it the same name as the Git repository you have down on your computer, gitprac. You could give it a different name, but I think it's less confusing if you keep the name the same. You could give it a description. How about practice repo for teaching, or in your case, for learning, perhaps. You'll make it a public repository. You can't have private repositories unless you pay GitHub a certain amount of money each year. You do not want to initialize the repository with README, and that's because it's going to get its README from the gitprac that you've already set up on your computer. And for some similar reasons, you're not going to add a .gitignore, and don't worry about adding a license right now. Let's just create the repository. All right. You get to a new kind of splash page. And the one thing you're going to do at this point is you're going to need to grab this URL that Git is going to use to access this remote repository later on. So you could copy and paste. You could also, I think, just push this little button here that copies onto your clipboard. So you do that. And let's go see what else we need to do. What we want to do is add that remote repository as a remote into gitprac. So heading back to our studio, so make sure that your project is the gitprac project that's inside of Git A, your person A still. And at the terminal, you want to type git remote. That's the command. And the kind of subcommand is you want to add a remote, and you get to decide what to call that remote. It's conventional for the remote on up at GitHub to be called the origin, because it will become the kind of default or original version of the project from which all collaborators will draw. And then you need to provide the URL, which you paste in. All right. You're ready to go. There's no response at the console, but the origin has been added as a remote. You can check that by doing git remote -v. That's for verbose, and it's going to give you a verbose report on all the remotes it knows about for the GitPrac project. Here they are. What it's saying is that you can fetch things from GitPrac up on GitHub, and you can push things to GitPrac on GitHub. Very good. Back to the slides. We've made these 2 commits. This project has a history now. We'd like to push that project with its history up to GitHub. And that's done with the command git push. Now, the first time you push up to that origin, you need to specify that that origin is going to become the default upstream repository for other pushes in the future. The -u will specify that. And the last thing you want to say is what branch of your repository that you want to push up there. In the future, your project may have many branches, and you can push any or all of those branches other places. There's only one branch here. It's master. Go ahead and save that. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Git push string origin master. Okay, so RStudio is going to ask you for your username, and that's your GitHub username. Next up, it's going to ask you for your password. All right, here comes my little secret password. And so in the console, we get a report of the push. All the objects in the repository that got pushed, they got compressed so that they would go over the web faster. And in the end, a new branch called a tracking branch has been established locally for you. And it's also called master, but it is a tracking branch. It tracks to see how your local repository and its changes compare to what's been pushed up to GitHub. Okay, we have just made a push. And that's wonderful. That's a really common sequence in your work. You will make some changes to your project. You'll stage them with the git add all of your changes. And then you'll take a snapshot of your project with git commit. Remember, always ask you a message and put a message in quotes describing your changes. And then you can just say git push, because the GitHub repository has already been established as the upstream. It'll understand that it's got to push the master to up to the origin. So if you were to go actually to your repository up now on GitHub, I'm just going to press the refresh button, you'll see that the look of it changes. Now it's got some things to show you. And other people can see this repository. It's public. There's ways for people to look at the history of the various commits that you have made. They can also, and we'll see this in a minute, clone your project and use it for themselves.